we're not going to solve the woes of the recording industry.
Why not? You said we would.
Hello and welcome to Outside the Fox, where we explore what's happening online and why it matters. I'm Steve Flavin.
And I'm Kim Horcher, and today we are going to be talking about something that is incredibly personal, yet is constantly changing. And that's how we listen to music, how technology affects it by how we experience it, discover it, and even make it.
That's right. And what is Firefox if not a window to the internet?
I mean, literally.
But if you zoom out, the way that we interact with music today is completely different than even 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, and these changes are just so imperceptible. Like, of course, I've always had all the songs in the entire world on my phone, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly that things are normalized. But let's zoom out and do a quick speed run of how we got here. A brief history of recorded music, if you will. If you look back at the genesis of the recording industry, as we know it, basically the 1800s is when gramophones became a thing.
I didn't know that.
Gramophone recordings, it was still very niche, expensive. It wasn't super mainstream. It wasn't really until radio, which is, I believe, the 1920s, where it became kind of a communal experience of listening to music at home. Previously, you're gathered around the radio, you're experiencing it together.
My grandma told me she used to do that. Mm-hmm. They'd all gather around and they'd listen to music and radio
plays. Dramas, yeah, that's right. And so in that era, you don't really choose the music finds you. So then we go into the owned era, which I believe it was the late 40s that vinyl records kind of emerged on the scene and became popularized over the decades. And then, of course, going into cassettes and CDs. This idea of collecting and curating and owning a collection of music was something that previously wasn't really a thing, but became much more mainstream and much more accessible during this era. And of course, discovery was amplified by radio. Radio is still a big way to get music out there, the Billboard charts, but also crucially, music videos and MTV became a massive way to bring the visual and the spectacle to music, and was a whole new way to reach people. I should also note that historically, the length of singles and albums has largely been dictated by the capacity limits of recorded media. So if you look at the average length of a single throughout all of history, a lot of it is, what can fit onto a 45, or, the length of an album, what can fit on an LP, flipping it over. Eventually you had like double LPs, you had CDs, which could hold up to 80 minutes. So albums got longer, and then you have double CDs or like multi-CD collections, which is a whole other thing. And so that brings us to the digital era, or what I call the infinite era, where now we have all of this choice. It's almost too much choice. But it was kickstarted by peer-to-peer services, which is nostalgic for those of us who remember Napster and what were the other services? There was Kazaa, there was LimeWire. It was kind of like whack-a-mole, where the recording industry sued a lot of these tech companies,
yep.
But also crucially, they pivoted at a certain point and started suing the people that were downloading
That's
music,
messed up.
which was not really a good look for them. But I had a friend in college who had to reach a settlement with, it's like the initial, when they were contacted by the legal team, was like, oh, you owe a bajillion dollars. And then they negotiated it to probably, she never told me how much it was, but I would imagine it maybe a few thousand. It was like kind of,
what are they doing with this?
I know, right? It's more like
the way you get it back by
like,
gouging one person.
It's like they're making an example of people.
I hate it.
It was not a great way. I think what they were very slow to come around to is that there was a demand for this access, this style of discovering and listening to music, where all of a sudden it's uncoupled from the stores and the recorded media. Back in the day, like if you liked a song on the radio and you go to a record store and maybe if you're lucky, you might get like a little listening station where you could preview preview 30 seconds from each track. But other than that, you're kind of taking a gamble on whether the whole album would be to your liking.
When I was a kid, I bought CDs, and sometimes there'd be maybe 2 good songs and the rest would be garbage, and I would just have to buy it. Yeah. And there's, if you think about it, most albums aren't wall-to-wall bangers.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I just got lucky. Like sometimes you would, or at least this was my experience, like sometimes you would discover new favorites that, is full of like great songs that weren't necessarily released as singles, that become new favorites. So that's, it kind of cuts both ways, but it kind of opened the floodgates with peer-to-peer, where all of a sudden people are downloading songs and discovering music that way, and gravitating towards singles. There wasn't really a legal sanctioned way to consume music in that way until iTunes, which paved the way for other music services. But that was sort of, what they call the great unbundling of songs, where you're no longer required to buy a whole album. Now you can buy individual songs off of the album. And so that affected how music is marketed, how, the Billboard charts work, kind of segues into the streaming era, where music discovery is algorithmic, and it's this emphasis on everything available instantly. Everything's on demand. But in a lot of ways, it's kind of cool that you could listen to like every new release when it comes out, without having to be selective,
I don't know. I think there needs to be a balance between what is convenient for us and what is fair to the artists.
Sure.
And, it's always been a little sketchy with streaming, and it seems like it's only getting a little bit worse all the time in terms of fairly compensating, but also being fair to us as consumers.
Yeah, well, all that to say, we're not going to solve the woes of the recording industry in the space of 20 minutes.
Why not? You said we would. You said we were going to do that today.
We can
What's
try.
Today about then?
We could try. But, for better or worse, a lot of artists make most of their income these days from live music, from going on tour. It's, from what I understand, a bit exhausting for them, because like when you're, life on the road, it's
a huge gig. Show every day. I mean, it's like doing a theatrical, like a Broadway performance.
Yeah.
Even. But like, I don't love consuming all my music that way. Sure. Because, Ticketmaster is not fun.
No.
And there's a lot of extra costs that I don't love.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's another good point, actually, in how tech has influenced the music industry. Is sites like Ticketmaster have driven up the costs of seeing music live, have reduced access. You're competing with bots and scalpers, and it's massively more expensive now than it ever used to be to go see an artist live.
I only bother with just like one artist, for the most part. Maybe if something crazy popped up, I would deal with all this.
Do you mean one artist is in like one per year, or like one specific artist?
One that I feel that is worth it.
And who's that artist?
Okay, so
I'm fascinated. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Who is my favorite musical artist to see live? It's Weird Al Yankovic.
I endorse that. Like, no, you have my full support.
He's so good live. He's so good also not live, but he's great live.
The last time I was in New York, he was playing, and we were staying across the street from Madison Square Garden. He was there, and we did it. He was sold out, but I bet he's. I've watched his concerts, like the taping, but I bet he'd be fun live. So
he's great.
I love that. That warms my heart that he's the one artist that you will see in person.
I'm not cool. I like Weird Al.
But it doesn't even necessarily need to be like a big concert. Like even if you're a small indie artist and you're playing smaller venues, like it's still a lot of work, and it's a lot, it's a big, massive life upheaval to tour multiple cities or more multiple countries even, right? Mm-hmm. So, that's tricky. But all that to say, in this new infinite era where everything's on demand, right? There are also new ways of discovering music beyond just the traditional streaming services. There's also YouTube and TikTok.
That's right.
And
TikTok is a huge driver.
Yeah. Nowadays, a lot of Billboard charts are influenced by TikTok, and songs that were released, years ago come back into vogue, and it's kind of fascinating to see. It's a bit unprecedented. There were maybe some outliers, in previous decades, but certainly not in the capacity that it is now.
All you need is one hilarious hook, and you got a hit, baby.
So yeah, I mean, basically, it goes from what's on to what I own to I'm overwhelmed. What do I even pick? So,
yeah, I get it. Because sometimes I don't know if you picked up from my Weird Al comment, but I don't really know how to find like the new trendy music. And when I go to my Spotify, for example, I get sometimes a lot of things that I don't really care for suggested to me, or the same thing over and over. So it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah. What, pivoting to our own personal music tastes and how we discover music, what have been some of your favorite releases recently?
I feel like you're asking just a complete music novice these things, because I don't really follow normal stuff. I like video game soundtracks. I like movie soundtracks. I've gotten really into vinyl lately.
Yeah.
I bought a spoken word retelling of the first Star Wars from 1977.
What?
Recently from a record shop. And it just,
from 1977?
Yeah, and it's just
wow.
a guy narrating the story, and occasionally the actors have lines.
That's fascinating, because that's like before VHS, right?
Yeah.
So that was like a way to, like, when you're waiting for it to come back into theaters, this is like a way to re-experience Star Wars.
I guess Obi-Wan did do that,
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, shout out to soundtracks. I love soundtracks. I was a huge movie nerd even when I was a kid, and so I think probably my favorite, or my first CD that I ever got, I think, was the Jurassic Park soundtrack.
That's a great one.
It's a classic. Still slaps. Still put that on.
John Williams.
Yeah.
Banger after banger.
I think that's a whole other niche that's in recent years, as physical media has kind of like had a resurgence. There are companies like Mondo that release soundtracks with,
I collect those, or I just started to.
Those are the best, and like alternate artwork. I have a coffee table book that's all the Mondo soundtrack art, that's like fascinating. And so there really is something to be said about like having the physical artifact and like having the artwork and being able to like put on a record and like listen to it recreationally, as not just background, but like as an active experience.
I got a 4 vinyl set of the World of Warcraft 20th anniversary, and it's so beautiful, and it's so nice to hold and look at and see all the care and detail they put into the art. I don't know if vinyl sounds better. I think some people would say yes, but it's got texture. It's grainy.
I'm not an audiophile. I'm told that it has a warmth, a character, but it is cooler because it's like, you got the big, it's like the ritual of like putting the needle on it, and I get it.
Watching it spin. That sounds kind of like how auteur directors are like, I only shoot on film. It must have this quality.
I think I mentioned this before. I worked on a musical project outside of Mozilla, and we're looking into doing a vinyl pressing for the soundtrack, which will be. It takes months. It's a long process, but it's like fairly straightforward, and it's kind of cool that. There are like these print-on-demand services, and like there are ways of putting your music out there, and there's a demand to do it physically, which is like decades ago it would have been unheard of for me to like upload some WAV files and like order my own vinyl. Like that's insane.
And get the art made and get the special edition. I mean, Olivia Rodrigo's Drop Dead is available in at least 9 different ways.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it is based on that, that extra care and that quality that's added to the physical media.
So, yeah, I mean, pivoting, I guess, to like newer music, other music. You mentioned soundtracks. I'm still somebody who likes to listen to full albums, even though things have moved in the direction of singles. I still like the process of listening to a body of work, a collection of songs from start to finish. These days, depending on the artist, some people take it more seriously than others. There are some artists that are really into like the statement that you create with with an album. I would say one of the major, like most mainstream examples of it is Taylor Swift. She's like very serious about like this album is called Midnights, and there's a theme.
This is what it means.
It's like it's a concept album.
This is each contributing factor to the overall thesis.
And I respect that. An album that came out recently was Ray's new album. This album May Contain Hope. Is phenomenal, like absolutely, like not a bad song on it. Is like the whole experience. It's so over the top. She collaborated with the London Symphony Orchestra, and she's there's a lot of like old school R&B influence. She's had some comparisons to Amy Winehouse, so there's like a little bit of that vibe. But she's an amazing vocalist. There's one track that she collaborated on with Hans Zimmer. So I think as somebody who likes scores, you should check it out. It's the music videos are phenomenal. We've talked about like vinyl versus CDs. I prefer CDs because they're more compact. They fit on my shelf.
It is in the name.
It is in the name. True to the name. They are indeed compact. It's also nostalgic for me because that's what I grew up with. So, but if I commit to buying an album on CD, it's something that is like shelf worthy, right? It's like something that I've listened to that I treasure, that it's like, oh yeah, this is like something that, it's almost like a desert island pick.
I get it.
It's like if the internet went out and I just want to listen to a CD, hopefully the electricity doesn't go out. Because then, I guess we're just sitting around the campfire playing songs.
Maybe do this with books.
Right? There we go. Well, I mean, that's also an example. I mean, that's a whole other
I only have, books that I love on the shelf, because if I had every book on the shelf, it would be too many books.
It'd be overwhelming. Honestly, I'm somebody who's like very minimalist in terms of what I have around me. I don't like a lot of clutter, but books are, for me, like an acceptable type of clutter. I like piles of books everywhere. I think that makes you look smart.
I really want to see what your home looks like now. Just piles and piles of leather-bound books.
Well, I'm in the process of moving right now, so it's a lot of boxes, but give us a few weeks and
okay.
We'll be settled in. But getting back to the music, we talked a little bit about concerts and music festivals. Coachella happened recently.
Somewhat recently.
It almost it almost seems like moments like Coachella are engineered for those of us at home, that it's a way to amplify what these artists are doing. Justin Bieber and Sabrina Carpenter are recent examples of, they had, it's interesting to juxtapose their sets because one was like a hugely maximalist, like big theatrical production
value.
And the other was very stripped down and informal.
Let's doom scroll, but on Maine.
And guess which one was which.
We know, everyone knows, but then the Bieber reaction was way bigger.
Yeah.
So maybe that lower level of production it kind of works in tune with how TikTok works, which is let's not go too crazy on how this looks. Let's just be authentic.
Yeah. It is fascinating to see because it was so different from what folks were expecting. I think that generates conversation. It is interesting. There was a lot of discourse around, so Madonna's coming out with a new album, and she joined Sabrina Carpenter at Coachella. There was a lot of discourse around the audience not really being into it.
They weren't vibing with Like a Prayer, and they weren't singing along. Or was it like a Virgin or Like a Prayer?
It was Like a Prayer.
Okay.
And it was seen as kind of like a microcosm of the festival in general, where it's like, people are there like watching the whole thing through their phones, and they're not really like dancing or enjoying themselves, or it's not visibly. And I don't know what that says.
I think I know exactly what it says, which is like proving you were there is more important than being there.
Yeah. Which is a whole other. There's a lot to unpack.
It's like
there,
when people take videos of fireworks, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Just experience this. It's going to be so much worse, and you're not going to watch it later.
Yeah. You're not going to watch it later, and you could watch lots of videos of fireworks, and it's the same as watching it
same thing.
live through your phone. So you might as well watch it with your eyes.
That's my pet peeve, by the way.
Yeah. No. I mean, we talked about this. I went to a concert recently where I did not take out my phone, and it was wonderful.
You film yourself singing?
I got to enjoy it. It was it's almost like I paid a lot of money to be there in person, and damn it, that's what I did. So.
Okay, I guess.
But zooming out as we kind of wrap this up, I think as a music fan, there's almost never been a better time to discover music. There are so many ways that you have access to it. If you want to get into physical media, you can do that. If you want to, listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music, you could do that too. You want to go see it live, there are just so many ways that you can interact. I suppose the takeaway is that tech isn't necessarily good or bad, but it's always shaping the experience.
Well, I personally think there's a lot of bad, but there is a lot that I can control, so I will focus on that.
Well, on that note, we really want to know, what's your favorite way of listening to music? Let us know in the comments.
In the meantime, subscribe and be sure to download Firefox because it's the best. We'll see you next time.